Kieran had always been terrible with directions, a trait that served him remarkably well in emergency drills but disastrously in everyday life. The research station sprawled across the asteroid like a metallic coral reef, its corridors twisting and branching with a will of their own. He had promised himself he would pay attention this time, but the holographic vending machine in the corner blinked enticingly, offering snacks from 5 different star systems. Curiosity triumphed over caution. He reached for a packet of luminescent crisps from Orlax IV, and when the machine beeped in protest, he leaned in, squinting at its tiny floating interface, completely forgetting the hall signs that were supposed to keep visitors like him out of restricted areas. The door he pushed open didn't lead to the rec room, as he had assumed, but to a space that smelled faintly of ozone and something faintly floral, with a light that shimmered as if the walls themselves were breathing. Kieran froze for a split second, realizing too late that the furniture seemed arranged for a single occupant, and that the room was impossibly tidy, the kind of tidy that radiated both precision and quiet pride. His foot caught on a low, floating rug, and he flailed, knocking over a display of miniature holographic plants that fizzed like soda cans opening, sending tiny sparks scattering. The sound made her turn. Elira sat cross-legged on a hovering cushion, her long ears twitching with that subtle rhythm that seemed to measure curiosity, suspicion, and disbelief simultaneously. Her eyes were a shade of violet that caught the ambient light and made it seem as though they contained a galaxy of quiet stars. Kieran's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, his words refusing to form coherent apologies. I thought this was the rec room," he stammered, waving one hand vaguely toward the corridor. Elira raised a single eyebrow, a movement so delicate that it could have been missed if he weren't staring so hard. "The rec room," she echoed, her voice melodic but laced with dry amusement, "is 3 doors to your left and 2 levels down. You, however, have made a creative choice." Kieran tried to nod, which only resulted in his head bumping against a floating orb that seemed to be part lamp, part security system. The orb buzzed softly, projecting a holographic "Do Not Disturb" sign directly onto his forehead, like a tiny floating judgmental drone. He yelped and ducked, sending a few more plants spiraling into the air. Elira sighed, her long ears tilting backward in mild exasperation, and yet her smile, small, amused, slightly reluctant, remained. "I am so sorry," Kieran said, his hands trembling as he attempted to write the last of the wobbling holograms. "I really didn't mean to invade your space." She regarded him for a moment, letting the tension hang, before speaking with a humor so dry it almost made him laugh. "Invade, that's one word for it. I was considering calling it a small war crime, but you seem harmless enough, mostly." Kieran blinked, relieved but also mortified. "Mostly." "Yes, mostly," she said, her ears flicking with a faint rhythm. "You have enthusiasm. And clumsiness, dangerous combination but not lethal, yet." He exhaled shakily and took a tentative step forward. "So, what do I do now? I mean, besides standing here like an idiot." Elira gestured toward a cushion on the other side of the room, which hovered slightly above the floor, obediently dipping as he sat with a graceless flop. "Do not sit like that next time. Or do. It will amuse me. But I would prefer you remain conscious." Kieran's gaze drifted around the room. Everything seemed alive in subtle ways. The walls pulsed faintly with bioluminescent veins, a gentle rhythm that suggested the building itself might be breathing. A small device hovered near the ceiling, projecting 3-dimensional constellations that moved lazily in patterns he couldn't immediately identify. He swallowed. "This is really something. I've never seen any home like this." Elira tilted her head and her ears twitched once, twice. "It is not a home for most species. It is adaptive. It responds to its occupant's mood and physical state. You are currently being tolerated, but that does not mean you are safe from minor inconveniences." Kieran's stomach lurched as he imagined the possibilities. Minor inconveniences. Such as, she said, and the floor under him rippled gently, being gently escorted to the exit via a corridor filled with floating objects that might trip you. Or perhaps an entirely new set of holographic plants designed to amuse me while you stumble. He laughed nervously, realizing her idea of a joke could easily turn his situation into a three-dimensional obstacle course. I guess I should be grateful you're letting me stay then. She leaned back, letting the hovering cushion tilt slightly under her weight, a gesture that seemed almost casual but spoke of control. You may stay, observe, learn. Do not break anything more critical than your dignity, and we will call this a successful intrusion. Kieran's ears, his actual ears, twitched in unison with his heartbeat. Successful intrusion, he echoed. Yes, Elira said, a faint glimmer of amusement in her eyes. Mostly harmless. You will learn from this. If you survive, perhaps even become interesting. Kieran tried to respond, but the words escaped him, trapped between fear, awe, and the faintly ridiculous sense that he had stumbled into an interstellar sitcom. He glanced at her ears again, long, elegant, twitching in subtle rhythms he did not understand. She noticed. They notice things, she said, answering the unspoken question in his expression. They tell me about moods, lies, truths, and occasional, minor irritations. Kieran leaned back, careful not to knock over anything else, and gave a small, embarrassed smile. I have a feeling I'm providing plenty of those. Elira's smile widened just slightly. You are, yes, but perhaps also some unexpected entertainment. For the first time since he entered, Kieran felt a sliver of relief, that strange comfort in knowing he was not about to be ejected into the void immediately. And for the first time, Elira allowed herself the smallest spark of curiosity about this human who had stumbled into her carefully ordered world, ears twitching in rhythm with her amusement, a living question mark that neither entirely fit nor entirely frightened her. The room hummed quietly around them, as if aware of the fragile truce, and Kieran, with all his clumsy enthusiasm, realized he had accidentally crossed a threshold he might never fully understand. But somehow, that threshold didn't feel like an ending. It felt like the start of something unpredictably interesting. Kieran had barely settled onto the hovering cushion when Elira rose, her long ears tilting forward as though sniffing the air for mischief. You must understand, she said, her voice smooth with faint amusement, that you are not accustomed to my environment. What you perceive as chaos is deliberate. Order exists, but it is subtle, like the pattern of stars in a nebula. He leaned back, watching a holographic constellation ripple above him. Subtle chaos, he muttered. I can get behind that mostly. Elira's lips quirked in a near smile. Mostly, yes, that is sufficient for survival. And for entertainment. Kieran groaned. I have a feeling I provide plenty of that already. Indeed, she said, floating across the room, her movements precise but elegant, a kind of dance he couldn't quite name. She gestured to a console that projected tiny orbs of light, each flickering in response to their conversation. These oracles track ambient energy and emotional fluctuations. They have determined that you are mostly nervous, partly amused, and dangerously clumsy. Kieran raised an eyebrow. Mostly nervous, partly amused, dangerously clumsy, you are a wonderful friend. I am your host, she corrected. Friendship is optional, tolerance is mandatory. He swallowed a laugh as he attempted to process the strange, floating room around him. The furniture shifted slightly when Elira approached, aligning itself to accommodate her movements. A small tea set hovered near her hand, radiating a soft glow. Do you drink anything, human? I can offer tea or a solution that approximates hydration for your species, though it may sparkle. Kieran hesitated, then shrugged. Sparkling sounds good, could be a new health trend. She produced a cup that shimmered faintly, the liquid inside resembling liquid starlight. He sniffed cautiously. Does it taste like stars or just cosmic disappointment? She ignored the jab, watching his expression. Taste is subjective. Some find it invigorating. Others find it disconcerting. Proceed at your own risk. Kieran sipped and immediately choked, his eyes watering as the liquid fizzed and expanded in his mouth like tiny glowing bubbles. Elira's ears twitched sharply, and she tilted her head with dry interest. That is your reaction, predictable yet amusing. Amusing, I nearly exploded, he wheezed. Okay, maybe a little amusing. You will adjust, she said. Or you will remain a spectacle. Both outcomes are acceptable. He wiped his mouth, laughter bubbling out despite himself. So, is it always like this? I mean your home, the tea, the oracles, the subtle chaos. Not always, she replied, gesturing to a panel of floating lights. Some of it is adaptive. It shifts with mood, intent, and emotional resonance. You, for instance, have disrupted the usual patterns considerably. Your presence creates anomalies. Kieran tilted his head. Anomalies, huh? I like the sound of that, makes me feel important. Elira raised an eyebrow, twitching one ear. Important or irritating, sometimes both, but you are interesting. That is a rare distinction in this sector. Most species are predictable. Kieran blinked. Interesting is good, right? It is tolerable, she said, for now. A sudden shimmer ran through the room, and tiny holographic fireflies flickered into life, circling around Kieran. What now? He asked, dodging one that brushed against his arm. Exercise, Elira said, her tone flat but her ears flicking in amusement. The fireflies detect imbalance. You have imbalance. They correct it. He sighed. I think my imbalance is permanent. Then you shall provide ongoing entertainment, she said, and perhaps enlightenment. There is much to learn about subtle interactions. Observation is key. Sensory calibration essential. He flopped back, letting one of the tiny orbs land on his shoulder. I already feel like I'm in some kind of interstellar boot camp. Perhaps, she said, but one with far fewer consequences than a real boot camp, mostly. They fell into a rhythm of shared space. Kieran stumbled through the tea ceremony, the firefly exercises, and the carefully floating objects that adjusted themselves in response to his presence. Elira demonstrated her techniques for subtle control, how her ears could detect micro-fluctuations in sound and energy, how she could anticipate emotion before it happened. Kieran tried to imitate her movements, flailing spectacularly but eliciting a soft chuckle from her each time he overstepped the rhythm. Your ears, he said finally, after a particularly embarrassing trip over a hovering cushion. They really do notice everything, don't they? They are extensions of perception, she said, letting her long ears tilt forward in explanation. They detect what eyes miss, what minds overlook, the subtle vibrations of thought and emotion. You are transparent. Kieran groaned. Transparent, that sounds awful. Not awful, interesting. Vulnerable, yes, but instructive. You create a pattern I can read, learn from. That is enjoyable in its way. He laughed, shaking his head. So I'm a walking lesson plan for alien observation. Great. That's just what I wanted today. You are learning, she said, her tone light but not unkind. As am I. Humans are unpredictable, fascinating. The afternoon, or what passed for afternoon in the shifting rhythms of her home, stretched onward. Kieran stumbled, laughed, sipped his sparkling tea, and listened as Elira explained, through a mix of words, gestures, and subtle ear movements, the cultural nuances of her people. He learned that every small twitch of her ears conveyed meaning, amusement, warning, curiosity, even caution. He tried to mimic them, resulting in a few disasters, including a floating pillow bonking him in the side, and Elira's soft laugh, quiet enough to tangle with his own clumsy humor. By the end of the cycle, Kieran was exhausted, sticky from tea mishaps, and thoroughly enlightened about how wrong he could be about everything in a single afternoon. Elira, for her part, was intrigued, her ears twitching with patterns of analysis that suggested she was both entertained and considering. She allowed him a measure of freedom in the space he had nearly destroyed, and he, in turn, began to understand the delicate balance between intrusion and curiosity. "You are learning the boundaries," she said finally, floating above him with her serene composure. "And I am learning your patterns. They are tolerable, even enjoyable." Kieran blinked, trying to parse whether that was praise or threat. "Enjoyable, huh? That's new." "Do not mistake amusement for approval," she said, though the faint twitch of her ears betrayed her humor. "But yes, you are tolerated with interest for now." He sat back, letting the room hum around him, alive in ways he could not fully comprehend. Somehow, despite the chaos, the mistakes, and the sheer absurdity of it all, he felt less like a trespasser and more like a participant in something he might not survive intact, but would certainly remember. Kieran had just managed to maneuver a floating teacup without spilling it, a feat he silently celebrated, when a soft alarm tone hummed through Elira's quarters. A small drone descended, projecting a holographic panel in front of him with glowing red letters. "Unauthorized presence, truthful confession required." His stomach sank. Elira's long ears twitched sharply, and she tilted her head at him, her expression calm but alert. "Ah, the Sentinel has awakened. It seems your continued presence has triggered a minor protocol." Kieran blinked. "Minor? It's asking for a truthful confession. What does that even mean?" "It means it demands honesty, but in a format compatible with the station's security matrix. You cannot lie, omit, or evade," she explained. "It will correct any deviation. Minor inconveniences may occur." Kieran groaned, dropping his cup. It floated gently back to the counter, unaffected. "Minor inconveniences. Sure, I'm sure a laser net or something will be harmless, right?" "Mostly harmless," she said, twitching her ears twice. "You will navigate it, you always do." The Sentinel's holographic voice intoned. "State your intentions regarding the occupant of this chamber." Kieran's mouth opened. He had rehearsed nothing. He waved his hands helplessly as a small holographic owl, one of Elira's monitoring constructs, zoomed past his head, circling him like a bemused spectator. "I am curious. I mean interested. Not in a bad way, I respect boundaries, mostly." The owl tilted, blinking its virtual eyes. The Sentinel projected a green check mark. "Honesty verified. You may continue under supervision." Elira's ears twitched with what could almost be amusement. "You see, adaptation and honesty, very effective. You are progressing." Kieran wiped his sweaty palms on his shirt. "Progressing. That's one word for surviving a security protocol that almost made me pee my pants." She ignored the complaint, gesturing toward a console that pulsed with soft light. "You have demonstrated growth. You observe now. You adapt. Your mistakes are fewer, and yet your curiosity persists." "Curiosity persists," he repeated, trying to sound profound while feeling profoundly ridiculous. "That's good, right?" "Yes," she said, "that is very good. Perhaps the best outcome." Kieran followed her as she guided him through the room, the floating objects subtly shifting to create a safer path. The tea set hovered obediently, the holographic fireflies weaving around them without collision. "I've never experienced a home like this," he admitted, "and I think I get why you're so meticulous. There's rhythm here, you notice everything." "I do," she said, "and you are less blind to it now, less disruptive. That is progress. That is trust." Kieran stopped processing the word, trust, something he had never expected to earn in someone else's world, let alone an alien world. "Trust, huh? That's actually kind of scary." "Scary is part of growth," she said, "and necessary for understanding." They paused near a console that displayed a holographic map of the station. Kieran noticed something new. A small pulsing dot marked their positions. "You watch a lot, don't you?" he asked. "Observation is essential. Misunderstanding is dangerous, but you've changed the pattern. I'm no longer merely observing, I am interacting, learning, amused, intrigued." Kieran's lips curved into a small grin. "I am somehow responsible for intrigue. That feels terrifyingly flattering." "Mostly flattering," she corrected, letting her ears twitch forward in subtle delight. "Mostly." The sentinel remained silent now, and the room felt lighter, almost playful. Kieran realized that despite the chaos, the floating objects and the occasional near disasters, he had learned something essential: patience, observation, humility, and the courage to navigate spaces where he didn't fully belong. "You are leaving soon," Elira said softly, her voice carrying a rare warmth. "Will you return?" Kieran hesitated. He thought of the hours spent stumbling, laughing, learning of Elira's subtle humor, the way her ears had twitched with amusement, caution, and curiosity all at once. "I think I might," he admitted, "but only if I can survive your tea and your fireflies." She allowed a faint smile. "Then you are welcome, and perhaps, next time you will enter with purpose, not accident." Kieran laughed. "Purposeful intrusion, got it, I can do that." "Maybe." Elira floated toward him, her ears twitching once in what could almost be considered affection. She handed him a small, crystalline token, pulsing faintly with inner light. "A gift," she said, "for understanding boundaries and occasionally amusing me. Keep it. Remember that respect matters and curiosity must be tempered with awareness." Kieran took it carefully, feeling the weight of both the crystal and the gesture. "I will." "Thank you, Elira." She inclined her head, her long ears twitching rhythmically, a gesture that now seemed almost human in its subtlety. "You have grown, Kieran. Do not forget this." He paused at the doorway, glancing back at the room that had almost consumed him, taught him, and left him laughing despite fear. "I won't," he said. "I promise." As he stepped into the corridor, the floating rugs shifted, the holographic plants nodded slightly in farewell, and the oracles pulsed with a gentle rhythm that mirrored his own heartbeat. The sentinel hummed softly, now idle, and Kieran realized he was no longer the bumbling, directionless human who had stumbled blindly into alien territory. He had observed, adapted, survived, and learned. And for the first time, he felt a strange mixture of exhilaration and calm. He had crossed boundaries, faced misunderstandings, and emerged not only intact but wiser, more patient, and perhaps more open to worlds he had never truly imagined. Elira watched from the doorway of her hovering room, her ears flicking in patterns he could not read, but somehow understood. Somewhere between amusement, approval, and curiosity, she allowed herself a moment